Hello, everyone. This is the Youth Politics Not Just for Youth panel. Originally, it was just going to be a bit of a Q&A with Ross with Sam, and then we were going to make fanzines, but Sam's not here, so we changed it. My name is Andrew Creak. I am the co-convener of Wales Young Greens alongside Ramona. Just to give you a bit of background on myself, I've been a candidate twice for the Wales Green Party in the last year, once in the Welsh Assembly election, both on constituency and regional list, and I was also by-election candidate in a ward that we had no chance of winning, but we did improve our vote sevenfold. We had 7 votes. While being co-convener, we have managed to release a youth manifesto, which I helped put together, which was mentioned at a youth politics event, UK-wide event, and it was mentioned as being an excellent way of getting youth involved in politics. And youth politics isn't just for youth, and that's what the point we're here today is, so that we can, if you have any questions about youth politics and how you can get involved, you can ask us. So I'm going to pass you over to my other co-convener who can introduce herself.
Thank you very much. Sorry if it seems a bit sort of thrown together. It definitely was. I haven't been co-convener for very long, but I do feel quite passionately about young people in politics, especially because a lot of young people are really, really interested, and I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about and not talk about enough, and there's just a few things that I thought to mention maybe. And just stuff like the fact that I feel like a lot of legislation or policy that affects youth isn't publicised a lot, it's not talked about enough, it's not scrutinised enough because they rely on young people being quite apathetic towards politics. And I don't feel like the interest isn't there. I feel like there is a lot of interest and there's a lot of willing to put energy into things. But I do feel like in politics, a lot of mainstream parties rely on us being disengaged so that they can kind of like ignore us or not really like treat us, I think, like or value us as we should be. I think sometimes young people are looked at as a resource for like future business rather than people in the future. I think that there are like several things that affect us, and I wish we were more involved and respected a bit more. I think there's stuff like all my friends at university now, they've got problems with their housing or problems with tuition fees at university. I feel like zero-hour contracts affects us a lot, and unpaid internships, and the fact that those internships are often geared towards vocational and business-like jobs rather than the arts affects youth. I think there's a lot to be talked about, which isn't, and it is hard to engage in politics as a young person, but I think everyone needs to put some effort towards it.
Thanks very much. As you've heard quite a few times this weekend already, I'm Ross Greer. I'm a Green MSP for the West of Scotland. I was elected in May, so I was 21 when I was elected, which made me the youngest MSP. But I had a background in youth politics before that. I'd previously been a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament and led on the campaign for Votes to 16 in Scotland, which we won successfully for not just the referendum, but it's now permanent for Scottish Parliament and for council elections. And very much following on from what Ramona was saying, I don't believe that young people somehow don't care about politics, or even often when we use the word apathetic, I think we're not using it correctly. It's so much more about alienation. There's a Glaswegian trade unionist, Jimmy Reid, who was the leader of the Upper Clyde's shipyards working in the 70s, and he gave a speech at Glasgow University, the commencement address, and it was printed in full in the New York Times. It was about the rat race, and he talked about the difference between alienation and apathy. People who feel alienated, feel disempowered. It's not that they don't care, it's that they believe that their voice means nothing, that their vote means nothing, there's no point in them getting involved because people who are distant from them, far more powerful than them, are the ones who ultimately make decisions. I think often young people feel like that, and our role is to persuade young people that actually they are individually, or we are individually and collectively incredibly powerful voices and can affect a huge amount of change. When I was a member of the Youth Parliament, we led on same-sex marriage in Scotland. So we pushed that campaign, got the ball rolling, the Equality Network got involved. We won in Scotland what is I would say is the strongest equal marriage legislation in the UK. We got every council to acknowledge the living wage. Young people did achieve a huge amount. It's because of the Scottish Youth Parliament that we had a smoking ban in Scotland so early into the Scottish Parliament. Huge amounts of achievements are made there when we have convinced young people that they can mobilise together and affect change. The challenge is actually getting to that point in the first place, especially when politics is full of people who look like me, white men in grey suits, and persuading young people, all young people, that actually there is a role for them in politics. And it's not just as what someone described to me as the poor body infantry, the ones who are out stuffing leaflets through letterboxes, etc. I shouldn't be the youngest MSP 5 years from now. There's no reason why we shouldn't have an 18 or 19-year-old MSP, why we shouldn't have young councillors, etc. What we need to do is bring young people into politics in a way that's actually engaging. Often, for too many people, getting involved in party politics means going to a local branch meeting to approve the minutes of the last local branch meeting. That's not what politics should be about. We need to figure out a way to empower young people so that they can actually get in there and deliver the change that's desperately needed.
Are there any questions from the floor? If not, I have some as well. I was wondering, you were saying just then that you were there to the Votes at 16 campaign, and I get a lot of people saying to me that 16-year-olds don't know what they're talking about. How did you find that, and if you come across that?
Yeah, we managed to blow that argument out of the water, this idea that 16, 17-year-olds simply aren't qualified, that don't know how to vote, don't understand voting. And that is absolutely not a criteria for whether you can have the vote or not. We all know some 40-year-olds who we've thought in the back of our head, oh my God, I can't believe that you're allowed to vote. The reality is everyone's allowed to vote and everyone should be allowed to vote, every adult. It's slightly different in Scotland in that we have a tradition, the age of majority, the age at which you're an adult, is 16 rather than 18. But we simply proved that 16, 17-year-olds could engage very effectively. Okay, fantastic. By actually having 16, 17-year-olds engage, every single one of the best debates that I did during the referendum was in a school, because young people were incredibly passionate about the issue. Everyone was. Independence was a huge issue for us. Young people were really passionate about it, but just wanted to get good answers as well. Often when we go to traditional hustings, the audience is full of people who are aligned with one party or one campaign group or another, who are there to make partisan points on behalf of their candidate or directed at another candidate, etc. All the youth hustings that I did in schools weren't like that at all. Young people just wanted the answers, they really cared about the issue, and they engaged incredibly impressively. And for anyone to, after the referendum in Scotland, say that 16, 17-year-olds can't engage, they have to provide a reason why it was somehow a failure. The reality is no one in Scotland thinks it's a failure. Every political party in Scotland now supports votes to 16. Even the Conservatives support it because 16, 17-year-olds engaged so well in that referendum. So for anyone to turn around now and say, no, we shouldn't have it at a UK level, we shouldn't have had it in the EU referendum, etc., they have to explain why they think it didn't work in Scotland, and there's absolutely no evidence of that. All the evidence is to the contrary. There was an amazing success empowering people in that referendum, not just that they engaged in the vote, but that young people are now far more politically engaged in general because we empowered them by giving them a vote.
Can I just lead on to that about not being able to vote in referendums and wanting answers? Because, like, I am looking into the possibility of going to university in Europe, and basically the deal with what information I can gather about that is that there is absolutely none. There is absolutely no discussion about the effects of leaving the EU on people in education. I think that's absolutely outrageous. I think also, like, 16 and 17-year-olds who are thinking of going abroad to study are going to be the ones that are affected by it, because even like me, I've got a few years of still technically being an EU citizen, but those young people that didn't get the vote are going to be the first ones who see that affected, and I think that's really is a disgrace. I think that shows we're not valued, and honestly, like, I've tried so hard to find information on it, and basically, as part of the negotiation, it might be a fact that our EU citizenship in regards to education doesn't change, and that we still get treated the same, or it might completely change and we are treated as non-EU citizens. And I think, as a young person engaged in politics, looking for answers and there being like absolutely nothing, I find that really, really disappointing and a massive letdown. And I think it's totally unfair that those young people affected by that had absolutely no say in it.
Oh, we have a question?
Yeah. Have I got them all?
I don't think there's one.
No, okay. Well, I'm 62, but I'm waiting to get my pension in 3 years' time because so-and-so won't give it me now. And I'm considering it. Depends how bad it gets, because I love Wales, but, you know, if it gets really bad here, and also, you're not sure that the politicians here won't go sniffing up the arse of Trump just to get some benefits from the special relationship. So, but young people, I would advise a young person these days, if they were clever, to move over to Europe because it's so bad. And I agree with you, it's absolutely disgusting that they're not considering that.
Yeah, personally, it's like in the future you want to move, and Europe is my third option. Scotland being first, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a very difficult time at the moment. Like, we have to think about the future. Like, in Wales particularly, we have one scheme which is paid for by the EU, which is Jobs Growth Wales, where you get put in a 6-month paid apprenticeship, and it's quite a good, like, it's quite a decent payment. It's not apprenticeship wage, if I remember rightly. And most of the time, at the end of that, you get jobs, but that's not going to be funded anymore. And in my council, they just, over the last year, they haven't implemented any apprenticeships, which was a key pledge of the Labour group in there. And with leaving Europe, there's a lot of funding that's going out, funded youth things, and most people didn't even know they're funded by Europe. Quite a lot of things funded by Europe, people didn't know. Like, in Pontypridd, there's a Lido that's just been built out, opened, and no one knew the EU paid for it. Jobs Growth Wales, for instance. But post-Brexit, it's going to be a lot more difficult for youths growing up, basically, because they're going to have a lot less options in what they can do.
Very briefly, I mean, I understand the temptation that a lot of people might have to want to leave, especially the direction of travel the UK is heading in at the moment. And it's easy for me to say, obviously, the position that I'm now personally in, at least for the next 5 years. But the one thing that I would encourage people to do is stay and fight. That this isn't over yet, that we can't let the populist right, we can't let the other side of all these debates win and just back off to other places that are in a slightly better or a much better situation. And we still have a huge amount of untapped potential in the power of young people in politics. A lot of what that needs in practical terms is something like, but much more effective than Rock the Vote in the US, which gets young people registered to vote and then gets them to turn out. There is Bite the Ballot in the UK. I have found Bite the Ballot to be very, very Southern English in its composition and not necessarily entirely relatable. But that's exactly the kind of project that deserves more funding, more attention to mobilise young people in a broad sense, but specifically for young people with our political agenda. There's never been a more important time to stay and fight. It can sound selfish saying to people that would personally get better opportunities if they moved elsewhere, no, you need to stay here and continue this slog with us. But otherwise we will lose, and I'm not willing to lose. I mean, I'm not willing to concede at the moment that Scotland isn't Europe. Scotland is Europe, it voted to stay in Europe, and that's our intention. But we can't give up on this yet. We've got far too much to lose, and we still do have the ability to win.
Does anyone else have a question? I can ask my own then. In Wales, when we are campaigning, this is directly to you now. In Wales, when we are campaigning, we do get a lot of, there's not much difference between us and Plaid, when there clearly is, because we're not members of Plaid Cymru. But I wanted to know if you had any suggestions for how we can tackle that and how we can have a clear difference between us and Plaid.
I suppose the first thing to say there is that there are differences between Plaid and the SNP, in that Plaid are, for all we are not Plaid, there's a reason that a Welsh Green Party exists rather than everyone here simply being Plaid. Plaid are to the left of the SNP, partly because the SNP is such a ridiculously broad tent, it's full of inherent policy contradictions. So we have the situation where we have an SNP Scottish Government as a parliamentary group, including former members of the Scottish Socialist Party and folk who are to the right most of the Conservative group. And they're bound together by their single policy agreement of independence, and they can find all sorts of other stuff to compromise on, and they just like being a competent government that just gets on with things. But there are all sorts of inherent contradictions there. The SNP is completely committed to tackling climate change, to reducing Scotland's carbon emissions, etc., and in extracting every last drop of oil and gas out of the North Sea. Those are two contradictory things. We will not tackle climate change if we extract every last drop of oil and gas out of the North Sea. As far as the SNP are concerned, those are not contradictions, because when your party is only bound together by a single policy objective, everything else can move, or everything else can actually be inherently contradictory and not bother you. But for us, it was about explaining the difference that we would make being part of the mix. So I talked earlier this weekend about our Scotland Can messages. The way we framed the debate was talking about how a better Scotland needs a bolder Holyrood, and saying that more Green MSPs would push the direction of travel, the centre of gravity, in a much bolder direction, which I think is something we can do here as well. And as much as Plaid might be to the left of the SNP, Plaid are not and will not be nearly as bold as we are in the policy proposals that we're asking for, and the kind of demands that we make, and the kind of, even the kind of rhetoric we use. And I think we use positive, constructive rhetoric, but it's still much bolder than what a lot of people in Plaid will talk about. So having that frame of the debate, saying actually having a Green Assembly member, a couple of Green Assembly members, pulls the direction of travel in a more progressive way. Or even you can take that down to local council level as well. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. It's a challenge enough for us with the SNP, and as I've said, the SNP are not Plaid. But it's about explaining to people the necessity of green politics, of why we are different, of why that fresh, more radical, bold voice is needed. I should say we always use bold rather than radical, because radical is off-putting for some people. But no one else at that point in Scottish politics was using bold. After the election, everyone else is using bold because we used it quite well when we think of a new word. But using that language, framing the debate really well, and explaining to people why, in the composition of an assembly or a council chamber, having those couple of green voices in there will pull things in a direction that is going to benefit them and their community more.
We have a question? Oh, we have a problem there.
Yeah, my question is mainly to Ross. What things have helped you get to where you are now? Because, if I was younger than I am now, I'm cross, but I'd be really cross if I was younger, because a lot of the big elections that have happened this year, if you look at the demographics, young people have lost, if you put it that way. But what has helped you get to where you are? And what can slightly older people do to help the youth?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time being cross in that I've been now on the losing side of 3 referendums, although that last one, I suppose, we didn't lose, but on a UK-wide level we did. Yeah, I mean, for me to get where I am, I joined the Greens when I was 15 because I didn't just want to be angry or outraged about issues and really wish that something was going to get done. Just as part of my personality, I would always rather do something about whatever the issue was, from whether it's politics or any other element of my life. I was just the kind of person that would rather go do something than spend hours discussing it in front of a TV or online or whatever, though I do point out that as well. I'm very argumentative on Twitter. But I always just wanted to get out there, and I found in green politics, in the Scottish Greens at that point, and I'm confident it's still the same now, that my age wasn't once seen as a barrier. People were either quietly supportive, so not in a kind of explicit, profuse, patronising way, oh, it's fantastic that we have young people here. They were just more quietly supportive. But being part of the party at the stage that there was meant that there were always plenty of opportunities to do things, because we were a small party that, like a lot of green parties, always lack people to take XYZ positions and things like that. A huge part of it as well was the period of Scottish politics that I'd grown up in. The month that I left school was the month that we launched the Yes campaign that I ended up working on, helped set up, and then became full-time member staff on. But for me, it was certainly through the party, even through the Yes campaign, through the things I was doing with the Youth Parliament, etc., that kind of quiet support. There were certain individuals, I remember someone who was on our Standing Orders Committee saying, oh, it'd be great if the Young Greens could come to conference, because then they could be the microphone runners. Because young people, they can do that, they can run. So that's really not how we draw young people in, because that's patronising, that's off-putting, etc. Whereas the people who just approached me as an individual and said, look, it would be great if you could take on this project or this role, etc., and just helped me do that, certainly built me up personally. I had really good opportunities in school as well, though, that my school, for a state school, actually did a lot of debating. So I was a lot quieter when I was younger at school, by the senior phase because I'd done a lot of school debating and things like that. And I'll be honest, we really never wanted to lose to a private school, so we put a lot of effort into making sure that we weren't losing as a state school to private schools at debating. And just all these little bits and pieces kind of built up my confidence, and there was always that network of people around me that were willing to support me in doing it. There were other things as well. I mean, I could give you a really boring life history. My church has been incredibly supportive, etc. But politically, it was that kind of quiet support rather than the profuse, oh, a young person finally turned up to a branch meeting. Here are 3 different things that we can immediately land them with. It was just much more quiet, but assertively supportive.
I just have a thing about getting them involved. We have 471 Young Greens in Wales, and I could probably list the really active ones on both of my hands. But if you want, young people are willing to help on the whole, mostly. Sam Murray, who's the co-chair of England and Wales Young Greens, always said Young Greens are not leaflet deliverers, but even if that's the way you get them involved, that's how I started becoming involved. I offered to do leafleting, and now I'm co-convener Young Greens. I've been a candidate twice, and this has been in a year. To get them involved, you need to invite them, talk to them, not just the general emails you send out to people. Specifically ask young people, like, do you want to come and help? Are you willing to help? What are you willing to do? So even if it's just phone banking or leafleting, canvassing, some of them will talk to anyone really. I'm a bit not that good at talking to people, but or they'll help them stall. It's just with young people, you need to, if you want them to help. Half the time they don't know when the meetings are, because the emails are always very confusing. And just reach out to them, and most of the time they will probably help.
Yeah, I think, not assuming that we're just going to be leafleting or maybe doing social media stuff, because all young people are really good at that, because I'm really rubbish. But yeah, I think young people can bring a really, really refreshing take to discussions on politics. I think, you talk to a young person, just another person with a view on things going on, and I think, making us, because it is us, feel like our views are really viable and valuable because they are, is really, really important. Getting us engaged. I think it's a really bad two-way system where we get things taken away from us, and we sort of maybe don't get focused on like we should be, and then you generate an attitude amongst some people that don't particularly want to give back to society, and I think that's a really negative thing as well. And I think the Young Greens has a lot to offer. The Green Party has a lot to offer young people. I think that's one definition, differentiation from Pride. We are so inclusive. I think that's really, really amazing. I think especially with the sort of erosion of unnecessary social boundaries that young people feel to do, I think the Green Party is the party for people to be in if they support that sort of movement. And also I'm a really firm believer in keeping environmental issues central. That's why I joined. And I think you could really engage young people with that. One of my favourite writers talks about something called shifting baseline syndrome, which is where you look around you at the environment, or you assume that how you have seen it in your lifetime is how it should be, and the truth is that people my generation and my age have never seen wildlife like my parents saw it. I think there's I think it's really, really sad that we think what the planet looks like today and the state of things today, not just talking about energy and specific economic things, but just wildlife in general is depleted, and it's sad, and I think young people do actually really, really care about that a lot.
Any questions? Oh, Jack.
Ross, you mentioned the Scottish Youth Fund. Wales used to have a youth assembly. It was underfunded and undersupported, and now doesn't. Do you have any insight on how we should start an effective campaign for a youth assembly?
Yeah, I was really sad. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was one point called Funky Dragon. Yeah. That's a bad place to start with when you're not when you're not giving it a serious name. I get why people felt the need to do that. I'd be surprised. I'm not going to rule it out. I'd be surprised if it was young people that made the decision to call it Funky Dragon. I imagine it was someone who thought that they were a brilliant youth worker, who was probably meaning well. But yeah, there's a huge difference between, for example, SYP and the UKYP. The UKYP, as far as I'm concerned, is incredible at under-delivering. it really does not achieve anything like what it should. When you compare it to, now SYP, we obviously work, and the organisation continues to work in a smaller political environment where it's easier to hold people accountable, it's easier to campaign, etc. But in the 2 years that I was in MSYP, we launched, ran, and essentially completed, or saw on the road to completion, 3 major campaigns. In that same 2 years that I was in SYP, I was a part of the UKYP as a result. It voted for, I think, a campaign on free public transport that it hadn't launched by the time I left, and I don't know if it ever launched. I certainly don't believe it ever achieved very much. The UKYP should be able to achieve a huge amount. In Wales, I find it unbelievable that any country could not have that kind of national level youth organisation. And the best way to go about it at the moment, I would expect, is to start identifying individual assembly members who would be supportive of something like that. Try and get a group of them that are cross-party and pull them together for it. You can, at the same time, be running pressure from the outside. So if the Welsh Young Greens wanted to run a campaign on this, just getting a petition up, lobbying other parties, but quietly as individuals trying to identify assembly members and bring together a group of them that would be supportive of something like this. And bring folk in from places like the Scottish Youth Parliament. I believe that the Northern Irish Youth Assembly is pretty successful as well. Bring folk in, bring them to the Senate or to meet local youth groups, etc. And show people why organisations like this are successful, why they're absolutely essential. SYP makes young people feel empowered, not because they're just a stakeholder in a consultation exercise, but because they're actual decision makers. As an MSYP, I was on my local authority's education committee. Now, there were all sorts of issues there. There were representatives of the local churches who were there without any democratic mandate, who had a vote, etc. But what we were always doing was ensuring that SYP wasn't just decoration, it wasn't part of a tick-boxing exercise. It was a serious decision-making body whose decisions actually had influence, or wherever possible, MSYPs were put on other bodies whose decisions had influence. So we're about to reform the Scottish Parliament, because it's been 17 years now and it needs a bit of a re-evaluation. There is a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament on the review group set up by the presiding officer, as well as folk from women's organisations, etc. And that's because SYP's proved its worth as a change-making body, not as a consultation exercise. So bringing in folk like that, taking them directly to those currently making decisions in Wales and saying, look, you are missing young people's voices out of this conversation at the moment. This is why it's successful. This is why it's necessary. Why on earth aren't you doing this? It's also quite a positive story to tell, trying to empower young people. The media quite like that. We brought up before issues with there not being enough Welsh media, but trying to get a newspaper or two on board certainly helps with things like that. They love talking about what young people achieve, even if they can get a touch patronising in the way that they do it.
Any more questions? No? So I think if we, the three of us just do like a wrap up now, and then we'll have to be done. So the title of this panel was Youth Politics, Not Just for Youth, and I think that's a really strong part. Like, no matter how old you are, you can either support youth, like politics that are directly aimed at youth, such as restarting Funky Dragon, which was one of our key pledges in our youth manifesto, to youth getting, like, not all youth politics are just for youth. So it's like, in where I come from in Caerphilly, we just had this massive local development plan, which we managed to get overturned through the people. But that would affect youth more than it affect everyone else. But it does still affect everyone, because it's like a community feeling. You need to, with youth, you need to get them involved because they are the future, to be cheesy. But it's true. You're in the future, like, if the youth don't get active now in the party, any party, it will not have a future. Because people do join, but not massively. And you always see the same faces at events, and like that's nice because it's like get good close friends with people. But unless you get youth members involved, the party won't go anywhere, in my opinion. I mean, you'll be stuck on the same. It won't be like we are a very democratic party, but it won't even be that democratic because you have the same people voting for the same things every time. And we are moving forward with the online voting, which got put through today, but without the youth being actively involved or even taking part in the online balloting, then the party won't move forward.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I think young people have a lot they can give. I think they have a lot of ideas. I think it should be a two-way thing. I think it should be high priority in the party to get young people engaged and active, because we do want to be, and I think mainly an issue facing young people is finding answers to things properly and actually identifying avenues down which we can go to get those answers. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important point about what issues young people care about, and it not just being youth issues. That was absolutely what we found during the referendum campaign, was that certain folk who were not young people expected that to persuade young people to vote yes or vote no, we had to talk about youth issues that all young people would care about in terms of independence, was whether or not tuition stayed free and issues like that. That absolutely wasn't the case. Young people engaged in every issue, and I would say engaged more successfully in every single element of the independence debate, not just those that affected them because they were characteristically a young person. So it was about empowering young people to be involved in the whole debate, rather than have something kind of sectioned off and say, here's where we talk about young people's issues, so we're going to get some people under the age of 25 to come in and talk to us now. It's about having young people as part of the whole discussion. And this party is actually a good example of that. At England and Wales level, the Young Greens decided a couple of years ago that things weren't changing fast enough, that the party wasn't representative enough, and mobilised really successfully to go as far as rewriting the philosophical basis of the Green Party of England and Wales, rewritten by, I believe, York Young Greens, and passed a conference because the Young Greens managed to mobilise, they managed to persuade enough people, they worked really, really hard on it. And that is a fantastic example of young people having a huge amount of influence within the party. And we see young people moving up within GPW. I mean, Amelia as deputy leader, fantastic example of where people who are involved in Young Greens can go within Green politics. But it's not just the case for us within the Green Party. I do think, though, that we give young people far better opportunities and far more opportunities than other parties do. The mistake is saying, as we mentioned before, that when young people get involved, oh, that's great, you can run our social media accounts because you're young, you understand the internet. That's not how we get young people engaged. And we shouldn't feel patronised. And other people will absolutely try to do that. In one of the first debates that I spoke in Parliament, it was the one I mentioned in my speech about refugee policy, and I had my amendment going through on devolving asylum support services like accommodation and education to the Scottish Parliament. And the Tories had came in with an amendment that looked on the face of it harmless, which is what enraged the rest of us, because we know that their party in government, their policies directly result in refugees dying. In appalling conditions for refugees, even once they do get here and reach the relative safety and security of the UK. And in my speech, I was calling them out on that, and the one Conservative member in particular was shouting over at me, "You're child, silly child." But it didn't matter, because I was going to win the debate, and he just had to suck it up. And a lot of it is about saying to people, don't feel patronised by that. Don't let the bad guys win, essentially. You know, we're in politics because we really care about what we're doing. We need to mobilise around what we're doing. We need to energise and enthuse young people. And that involves getting other young people to do it. It was something we were dedicated to in the Yes campaign for all of our groups, was having people from that community talk to other people like them. With the best will in the world, you're going to find it much harder to energise and engage with and connect with young people if you are not yourself a young person. It doesn't exclude you from doing it. There are plenty of brilliant youth workers of all ages, for example. But this party has a huge proportion of its membership who are Young Greens. We need to tap into that. We need to find those who have the potential to be fantastic leaders within the Young Greens, within the party more generally, and support them, give them the tools, the resources, the advice needed to do it, because it will be transformative to our internal culture and to our electoral success as well.
So I'd like to thank my co-panellists, Ross and Ramona, and especially thank you to Ross for coming down from Scotland. Thank you, everyone.